Good evening. Thanks for joining us on India Business Hour. I'm Shereen Bhan. The headlines we're tracking for you tonight. TCS delivers in Q3 revenue ahead of estimates with nearly 3% sequential growth. Margins are largely in line. The company also announces a dividend of 75 rupees per share. The TCS management remains cautious on the growth outlook. Red flags Europe is the big concern. Order book remains steady even as it drops below $8 billion. Attrition declines sequentially but remains elevated at over 21%. The government and LIC will eventually exit from IDBI banks, as the DPAM Secretary Tuhin Kanta Pandey adds. The government has received multiple bids from domestic and foreign investors. Sources say Prem Vatsa's Fairfax Group, Middle East banking giant NBD and private equity player CVC Capital are among the suitors. Stock market snaps a three-day losing streak. The Sensex gains over 800 points. The Nifty reclaims 18,000. Banks and IT stocks lead the charge. Shake-up at the largest milk cooperative in India. After over a decade at the helm, R.S. Sodhi resigns as the managing director of the Gujarat Cooperative Milk Federation, which owns the Amul brand. Jayan Mehta, who's been with the federation for over 30 years, will take charge. The Bombay High Court grants a two-week bail to former ICICI Bank CEO Chanda Kochar and her husband Deepak Kochar in the Videocon loan fraud case. The court says the arrest was not in accordance with the law. Orders Kochars to cooperate with the investigation whenever summoned. Minority investors in Jet Airways stare at a complete wipeout in their share value after the Jalan Kolrao consortium takes over. The resolution plan document accessed by CNBC-TV18 shows public shareholding will drop from 25% to a mere 0.21%. Reliance Capital lenders to decide on a second round of e-auction after Torrent Investments and Hinduja Group sought to revise their bids. All four suitors, including will be allowed to bid in round two. Meanwhile, NCLT refuses to grant an urgent hearing to Torrent, seeking a stay on lenders' reopening bids. Uttarakhand's Joshimath declared disaster-prone after cracks appear in homes and roads, forcing authorities to evacuate scores of families. The state's Chief Minister Pushkar Singh Dhami tells CNBC-TV18 80 families have been moved to a safe zone so far. At least 600 families have been affected. The Chief Minister says the number is expected to rise. Hundreds of Bolsonaro supporters were arrested after storming Brazil's congressional building, the Supreme Court and presidential palace in the capital. Protesters allege that the presidential elections in which the veteran leftist leader Lula da Silva emerged victorious were rigged despite a lack of evidence. President Lula said his predecessor triggered the riot. Rolls-Royce sold more than 6,000 cars in 2022, the highest annual sales in the company's 118-year history, driven largely by Indian customers who form a substantial part of the portfolio. Well, market action, Dalal Street snapping a three-day losing streak. The Sensex gained over 800 points, getting back above the 60,000 mark. The Nifty gained nearly 250 points, reclaiming 18,000. Positive global cues boosted sentiment today, and banks and IT stocks led the rally. Oil prices are also rallying on the back of demand revival expectations from China as the country reopens its borders. China is the world's biggest importer of crude, and restarting of its economic activity has meant that the oil demand is likely to move higher, and that's pushing prices higher as well. But the big story this evening, TCS has started the third quarter earnings season, and it started it on a positive note. Revenue growth was just under 3%. That is in line with estimates. Margins at 24.5%, also in line with estimates. Attrition at 21% seems to have peaked. The company believes that we will start to see a decline from here on. The TCS management did sound cautious on growth, did red flag demand specifically from Europe as a big concern, but North America demand there in the management's commentary continues to be supportive. Rima standing by with more on the TCS Q3 fine print, delivering ahead of expectations in many ways, Rima.
Thanks so much for that. It's a pretty good showing from TCS this time, not as bad as what the markets were fearing. The company's reported a dollar revenue growth of 2.9%, constant currency revenue growth of 2.2%. This is better than what the street was anticipating. Margin improvement at 50 basis points is a bit muted. Margins have come in at 24.5%, but the management is confident about margins improving to 25% by Q4. Profits slightly lower than what the street was anticipating on the back of lower other income. The other few important internals: deal wins steady, $7.8 billion, lower than the prior quarter, within the company's guided band. Attrition has fallen by 20 basis points on the last 12 months basis. This is after 6 consecutive quarters of an increase. So that's a positive, and the management seems to indicate that the quarterly annualized attrition has fallen a lot faster. The muted number this time has been the fact that the headcount, the overall headcount, has declined by nearly 2,200 employees, the management says, and that's because we had hired 42,000 freshers so far this year, and that's the reason why the hiring has been muted. There is a special dividend as well of 67 rupees, taking the total dividend to 75 rupees. That's something the street will like. So in a nutshell, Q3 has not been as bad as what the markets were fearing, though the management is sounding a bit cautious on Europe, even as North America continues to hold up pretty well.
In terms of overall demand trends, I think the quarter has been and continues to be about different markets behaving differently. North America continues to remain quite vibrant. Europe is the market where client decision making is getting impacted by the ongoing geopolitical challenges there, and requires close watching in terms of how it progresses through the quarter.
The big newsmaker this evening, DPAM Secretary Tuhin Kanta Pandey, says the government and LIC will eventually want to exit from IDBI Bank. Speaking exclusively to Sapna Das, Pandey said multiple domestic and foreign investors have expressed interest. Sources say Prem Vatsa's Fairfax, Middle East banking giant NBD and private equity player CVC Capital have thrown their hat into the ring. Here's the DPAM Secretary on the due diligence process, which he believes could take up to 3 to 4 months.
Well, I think the transaction advisor, he has advised that there's been good response.
You know, at least at our end, we can safely assume that at least 3 and more bids have come in. And again, in terms of the potential sectors which are represented, mainly banks, non-banks, or is it a healthy mix?
After the initial bids come in, there is a question of checking the bids and the papers, which the transaction advisor does. Also, there is a fit and proper in this case involved right in the beginning with the RBI, and accordingly, I think they will be submitting papers to the qualified ones will be submitting papers to the RBI. And this is a bank. I think it's more like in the nature of financial information and accounting information, not in terms of as much on the physical aspects. But nevertheless, I think 3 to 4 months is the minimum time which is required for due diligence process. Both LIC and government do not intend to stay on there. It's only an interim arrangements that we are there as a financial investor, both in terms of the size of the transaction that it would mean, also because of the upside that we might like to take it in post this investment. Okay. So in both cases, I think both LIC and government, they would like eventually to exit in a time frame which will be defined in future.
Well, that is the DPAM Secretary on the IDBI Bank disinvestment. The Bombay High Court has granted a 2-week interim bail to former ICICI Bank CEO Chanda Kochhar and her husband Deepak Kochhar in the Videocon loan fraud case. The court said that the investigating authorities have not been able to prove the reasons for the arrest, terming the arrest illegal. However, the court has told the Kochhars to appear before the authorities whenever they are summoned. Yash is standing by with the details of the court order. Yash.
Well, this indeed is a big relief. Chanda Kochhar, former ICICI Bank CEO, and her husband Deepak Kochhar will be released after the Bombay High Court today said that their arrests last month were illegal. This, as I said, is a big relief from the Bombay High Court. Comes just before the wedding of the Kochhar's son on January 15th. The Central Bureau of Investigation, or CBI, had arrested Chanda Kochhar and husband Deepak Kochhar on December 23rd in a case linked to quid pro quo and other irregularities in a 3,000 crore loan provided to the Videocon group by ICICI Bank. And this was when Chanda Kochhar was heading the bank. The court observed that the reason stated by CBI for Chanda and Deepak Kochhar's arrest, which was non-cooperation and incorrect disclosure, cannot be the ground for an arrest. Chanda Kochhar had challenged this arrest by the CBI as they argued before the High Court that their arrest is illegal as they had been complying with agency's conditions. Chanda Kochhar and husband Deepak Kochhar will be released on a 2-week bail for a sum of 1 lakh rupees each. As per High Court's order, both will have to cooperate with the investigation agencies whenever they are summoned.
Yash, many thanks. So relief there for the coachers. The other big story, a shake-up at India's largest milk cooperative. After more than a decade at the helm, R.S. Sodhi has resigned as the managing director of the Gujarat Cooperative Milk Federation, which owns the Amul brand. Sodhi joined the largest milk cooperative in India as a sales officer more than 40 years ago. Shilpa Ranipeta with the details.
Now, in what has been seen as a rather sudden move, R.S. Sodhi has been asked to step down as the MD of the Gujarat Cooperative Milk Marketing Federation. That's the cooperative that runs the brand Amul. Now, Jayant Mehta has been appointed as the interim CEO. Jayant Mehta was the COO before he was given this position, and Sodhi has been asked to resign with immediate effect. Now, Jayant Mehta has been with the company for about 31 years, but R.S. Sodhi, he's been with Amul since 1982, and he has been the MD of GCMMF since 2010. Now, the reason for the resignation, that is not clear yet. We spoke to a couple of employees and they're given to understand that it has been rather sudden in the organization. Also, no one had actually seen this coming. But do remember that Sodhi was on an extension. His term as the MD was extended for another 5 years in 2017, and currently on the extension, he has been asked to resign with immediate effect. Now, what the reason is, that we hope will come out through an official statement very soon. Back to you.
Shilpa reporting there on the change at Amul. Jet Airways public shareholders are staring at a wipeout in their share value after their stake in the company declines to 0.21%. Now, according to the approved resolution plan document accessed by CNBC-TV18, the Jalan Kalrock Consortium is proposed to reconstitute public shareholding from 25% to 0.21%, resulting in an almost complete wipeout of the current market value of holdings of public shareholders. Madhya joins us now to explain what this essentially means. Madhya, break this down for our viewers. What happens to public shareholding once the takeover happens, and of course, in this case, if it happens?
Well, you're right. It is going to be a wipeout of market value for public shareholders. At least that's what I gathered after going through the extensive and exhaustive resolution plan document. So here's what the Jalan Kalrock Consortium has proposed as shareholding pattern after it takes over the airline. Shares adding to 89.7% of equity will be issued to the new promoters, and equity of 9.5% will be issued to assenting financial creditors after their conversion of debt. Remember, lenders have taken a whopping 95% haircut in this resolution plan, and the share in equity is what they had settled for in return of that massive haircut. There's something for employees and workmen as well. They will get 0.5% equity after the takeover. But here's what happens to public shareholders. Currently, public shareholders own about 23% in the over 800 crore rupees market cap company. After the reconstitution exercise, their holding will drop to a mere 0.21%, erasing almost entirely the value of their shares. The plan also proposes that the resolution applicant will restore public shareholding to 10% within 18 months and to 25% within 3 years.
Madhya, many thanks for joining us. Staying with aviation, Air India continues to be on the DGCA's radar. The aviation regulator has now issued a second notice to the airline, this one for 2 incidents of unruly behavior that occurred on the 6th of December on a Paris to Delhi flight. DGCA says Air India did not inform the regulator about these incidents until it asked the airline for a report. The DGCA says the airline's response in reaction to these incidents has been lackadaisical and delayed. Shares of Vodafone Idea hitting a 52-week low on day one of this week's trading session as investors are cautious over the company's financial health. Remember, CNBC-TV18 reported last week that the SBI-led consortium is unwilling to give fresh loans to the telecom operator till promoters infuse more funds. The company had approached banks seeking emergency loans aggregating to 7,000 crore rupees, a bulk of which was to be used to pay dues of Indus Towers. Just over 20 days to go for the union budget, with India's current account deficit ballooning to a 9-year high of $36.4 billion. We learned from sources the finance ministry could announce some measures in the upcoming budget to curb the CAD. The finance ministry is in talks with the commerce, petroleum, fertilizer and farmer ministries. Some of the measures include discouraging imports of non-essential items across sectors, possibly hiking import duties where needed, and a crackdown on imports circumventing the country of origin norms. The Delhi High Court, hearing a plea filed by Bharat Pay seeking a gag order on former MD Ashneer Grover, observes that the two parties may have had a falling out, but should extend a courtesy to each other. The court has allowed Grover to red flag leaks to the media public comments by Bharat Pay. Ashneer Grover's lawyer has said that he will also advise Grover to exercise some restraint. Onto the race for Reliance Capital. Lenders will take a call on a second round of e-auction after Torrent Investments and the Hinduja Group sought to revise their bids. Ritu joins us now with more. Ritu, what's next?
That's right, the lenders to Reliance Capital are voting on a proposal to allow a second round of e-auction for the company in a bid to avoid a legal wrangle and also to secure better offers. This comes after two of the interested suitors, Hinduja and Torrent, sought to tweak or revise their bids after the conclusion of the first round of bidding. Now, we understand that this time around, the base bid could be set at 9,500 crore rupees in net present value terms, which would include a minimum cash component of 8,000 crore rupees. However, if the second round does happen, it's not just Torrent and Hinduja, but all four of the original suitors will be allowed to participate, which includes Oaktree as well as the consortium of Piramal and Cosmia. The results of the voting are likely to be declared only later this week. Now, meanwhile, Torrent had moved the NCLT seeking a stay on the lender's proposal to conduct another re-auction, but Torrent did not get any urgent relief in the matter, and the court will now hear the case on the 12th of January. Remember, in the first round of bidding, Torrent had emerged as the highest bidder with its offer of 8,640 crores, but Hinduja later revised it to 9,000 crores as its final offer. Torrent had objected to that and got an interim relief from NCLT. Final orders there are still awaited, but Torrent also later tweaked its bid to offer the entire sum of 8,640 crores as upfront cash to lenders in a bid to outdo Hinduja's revised offer. So now, if the COC approves the second round of auction and there are no legal hurdles, the process will have to start afresh.
Ritu, many thanks. Rolls-Royce says it's recorded its highest ever annual sales in its 118-year history. The company sold over 6,000 cars in 2022, with the year being its best in more than a century. And here's the India connection. Indians across the world were amongst the biggest buyers of Rolls-Royce worldwide. The company told CNBC-TV18 that Indian customers are a substantial percentage of the Rolls-Royce portfolio. So Mercedes, Rolls-Royce, luxury car makers raking it in 2022. Staying with automobiles, CNBC-TV18's Danish Anand caught up with electric vehicle maker Ather Energy's co-founder and CEO Tarun Mehta in Bangalore. He spoke on the updates to Ather's scooter, the product pipeline, and why 2023 looks better for the EV player. Take a look.
2023, if anything, looks even better because now a lot of the fundamental pieces are in place. Product is working, operations is scaling, and new stores are opening super fast. We think this is the year when very clearly scooters are going electric almost completely. I think we'll see scooter penetration of electrification at possibly 30-35% by the end of this year, which means a 4-5x industry growth once again.
That's Ather's Tarun Mehta. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman shared important life lessons while speaking to young students at an event in Kota. From tips on navigating the ups and downs of life to catching up on those who do not pay taxes, the Finance Minister was at her candid best.
How can you motivate people to pay their taxes, and how can you catch hold of those who are not paying them? Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. Catch hold may not be the word. Catch hold of those who are not paying? No, that may not be the word. We motivate them, we nudge people, saying your little tax helps us to, take care of children from poorer household, farmers. But I won't pretend saying I don't catch up at all. We also do some kind of a catching up. And how? Suppose there are people who are going on expensive holidays abroad or buying expensive cars. At the point where they buy their tickets or at the point where they buy the car, we take a small minimum percentage of tax deducted at source.
मैम, जब से मैं यहाँ पे आई हूँ बहुत सारे अप्स एंड डाउन्स आए हैं. कॉन्फिडेंस कभी एकदम लो हो जाता है, बहुत प्रॉब्लम होती है.
You should be the last person to be tensed. Yeah, you're getting up to say, look, ups and downs. The moment you have recognized ups and downs, that's half the bridge crossed. I'm honestly telling you this. I'm honestly telling you this. And if I were to be closer to you now, I would have given you a huge hug. Honestly.
Well, that's the finance minister. Time now for us to head into a break. But up next, Uttarakhand's Joshimath declared a disaster-prone zone after cracks appear in homes and roads, forcing authorities to evacuate scores of families. CNBC-TV18 finds construction activity continues just a few kilometers away from Joshimath despite a ban. That and more when we return. More than 600 families in a small town in Uttarakhand are staring at an uncertain future. Cracks have appeared in houses and roads, forcing authorities to evacuate people. Reports of such cracks in Uttarakhand's town's infrastructure were first reported in 2021 after landslides took place in the district of Chamoli. All 9 municipal wards of Joshimath have now been declared as landslide subsidence zones. The district administration is distributing necessary assistance funds for essential household items to the affected families. Chief Minister Pushkar Singh Dhami says 80 families have been moved so far. Locals blame NTPC projects in the area for causing ecological imbalance. NTPC denies allegations. Uttarakhand state authorities have banned all construction activity in and around Joshimath. Our reporter Santya Gora reports from Joshimath, and she finds that construction activity in fact continues just a few kilometers away from Joshimath despite the ban.
According to state government, no construction work should happen in and around Joshimath, but here, barely 11 kilometers away from the center point, you can see heavy construction work which is going on right now. We tried to figure out what kind of a construction work is happening and who is responsible for this, but we couldn't figure out that. We didn't get an answer. Now, CNBC-TV18 spoke to the CM of the state, Mr. Pushkar Singh Dhami, and he also assured us that how state government is doing everything in order to ensure that the situation doesn't become worse.
हम सभी शहरों की क्षमता का आकलन करवाएंगे। इस घटना के बाद हम ये एक हमारे लिए एक आगे के लिए पार्ट भी है और जहाँ भी ज़्यादा कंस्ट्रक्शन हो चुका है, जिस शहर की जितनी क्षमता है उससे अगर ज़्यादा हो गया है तो हम उस सभी को रोकेंगे अभी।
Now we are 7 kilometers from Joshimath and this is the second construction site, and you can see here, so what they are doing, they are cutting this mountain. This is a construction work, a construction activity which is taking place in order to broaden the road. There is no representative of the state government from any of the agency to ensure that the orders which were issued by the local administration are being followed. You can see that the construction work is going on despite the fact that state government made it clear that all kind of construction work, I repeat, all kind of construction work in and around Joshimath should be immediately halted. But here, 7 kilometers away from Joshimath, you can see the second construction site. In Uttarakhand, with camera person Lakshman Singh, this is Santya for CNBC-TV18.
Santya Gora there reporting that construction activity continues around Joshimath. This despite the fact that there is a construction ban in place. Families are being evacuated to safety, and yet this continues. Let's take a look at some of the other headlines we are tracking. Train and flight operations face disruptions as North India continues to shiver. Over 100 trains cancelled due to dense fog, leading to poor visibility. Over 300 flights reportedly delayed to and from the Delhi airport. The big global story, thousands of supporters of Brazil's former president Bolsonaro went on a rampage in the capital, Brasilia, yesterday, breaching security barricades, storming into the presidential palace, the Congress and the Supreme Court. Hundreds have been arrested so far. Protesters have been claiming for months that the presidential elections where veteran leftist leader Lula defeated the far-right Bolsonaro were rigged. All of this despite any evidence to suggest so. Prime Minister Modi inaugurated the 17th edition of the Pravasi Bharatiya Divas in Indore. He called the Indian diaspora brand ambassadors of the nation.
मैं आप सभी को, सभी प्रवासी भारतीयों को विदेशी धरती पर भारत का राष्ट्रदूत, ब्रांड एम्बेसडर कहता हूं। सरकारी व्यवस्था में राजदूत होते हैं, भारत की महान विरासत में आप राष्ट्रदूत होते हैं।
Well, the Pravasi Bharatiya Divas kicks off, and that is it on this edition of India Business Hour. Thanks very much for watching. Stay tuned. The news continues on CNBC-TV18.